Listen closely. Stay where you are. Breathe. Feel the room dim just a notch, like someone lowered the lights without asking. There's smoke in the air, not fire, not chaos, just enough haze to blur the edges while the center sharpens. And right there, in that half-light, the camera doesn't rush you, it studies you, because you've been studied before. Not by friends, not by fans, by analysts, by profilers, by people trained to read what others miss. And here's the unsettling truth they never say out loud. You don't move like chaos. You move like calculation. You're not loud. You're not reckless. You're not desperate. You're quiet in a way that makes rooms nervous. That's where this begins. Not with rage, not with noise, but with restraint. Because restraint is the first signal of danger they can't label. You see, amateurs explode, professionals compress, and you've been compressing for a long time. Early on, you learned something most people never figure out. Emotion is energy, but uncontrolled emotion leaks, so you stopped leaking. You learned to sit still while storms passed through your chest. You learned to nod while people underestimated you. You learned to let them talk, and talk, and talk, while you mapped their patterns. That's not darkness, that's strategy. This is where the profiler's pen hesitates, because the profiles they write rely on predictability, impulse, patterns that repeat because the subject can't help themselves. But then there's you. You don't repeat when watched. You don't react on cue. You don't perform your thoughts for the audience. You adjust. You disappear when expected to engage. You engage when expected to disappear. Silence becomes a weapon in your hands. Not the absence of sound, but the presence of pressure. Calm becomes armor. Not because nothing affects you, but because everything does, and you still choose precision. Watch the shift. At first, the world tries to label you as dark, because they don't have a word for disciplined intensity. They call what they don't understand by the names that scare them. But darkness, when refined, becomes clarity. You stopped confusing intensity with volume. You stopped confusing power with display. You realized that the most dangerous figure in the room is never the one demanding attention. It's the one collecting information. So you started collecting. You collected tells, micro-expressions, timing, who speaks first, who interrupts, who fills silence because they can't tolerate it. You learned that people reveal themselves fastest when they believe nothing is happening. That's when you move internally. No announcement, no drama, just alignment. This is the early transformation most people miss. The moment you stopped trying to prove anything, proving is loud, positioning is silent, and silence stretches. It stretches until others project into it. They imagine your intentions. They write your motives for you. They fear what they can't hear. That fear does half the work. Here's the first rule, etched, not spoken. Never rush what others are already nervous about. You let anticipation ferment. You let expectations rot into mistakes. Because the beast doesn't lunge blindly. The beast steps back before precision. This is where tension cycles. Pull back, hold, release just enough to reset the room, then pull again. People think control looks like dominance. They're wrong. Control looks like patience under pressure, and you mastered that when no one was watching. There's a moment profilers dread, the moment when a subject doesn't spike emotionally under stress. No erratic signals, no cracks, just adaptation. That's when the notes slow down. That's when the room goes quiet. Because unpredictability isn't chaos. Unpredictability is choice. You choose when to engage. You choose when to withdraw. Charged, deliberate, held like a breath no one else realizes they're sharing with you. Because this is where perception flips. They thought stillness meant hesitation. They thought quiet meant uncertainty. They thought distance meant disengagement. They were wrong on all three. Stillness is calibration. Quiet is filtration. Distance is perspective. And perspective changes the geometry of power. When you step back, the board reveals itself. Not just the pieces, but the hands that move them, the incentives behind the smiles, the fear behind the authority, the fragility behind the noise. You noticed how quickly confidence collapses when it's not being fed, how people fidget when they're no longer mirrored, how leaders lose balance when someone refuses to orbit them. You stopped orbiting. That was the moment gravity shifted. Here's the tension most people can't tolerate. You can see the outcome long before you touch it. And seeing it early means waiting. Waiting without leaking intent. Waiting without rehearsing victory. Waiting without flinching. This is where amateurs confess their plans through impatience. This is where you don't. Because you learned the third rule, etched deeper than the others. Information moves faster than force, and silence moves faster than information. So you let others broadcast. You let them over-explain. You let them lock themselves into positions they can't retreat from without losing face. Face matters to them. Results matter to you. That difference is decisive. The pressure builds again, not outward, but inward, a tightening coil. Because you're not suppressing anything, you're storing it. Stored energy doesn't shout. It hums. And people feel that hum before they understand it. They start adjusting their tone around you. Their jokes land softer. Their challenges arrive wrapped in politeness. They seek cues you never give. That's dominance without declaration. You didn't seize control. You withdrew volatility from the environment. Volatility favors noise. Stability favors the prepared. So you became stable in ways that confuse aggressive systems. Unreactive where reaction is expected. Flexible where rigidity is assumed. You made unpredictability look calm. That's the paradox they can't resolve. Because unpredictability is supposed to look wild, but yours looks intentional. Which brings us to the transformation point, the one they don't see until it's already happened. You stopped measuring yourself against opposition. You stopped defining progress by conflict. You stopped needing an enemy to feel sharp. Sharpness became internal. Your standards rose quietly. Your tolerance dropped invisibly. Your focus narrowed, not tunnel vision, precision vision. You know exactly what matters, and everything else falls away without drama. That's why distractions don't hook you anymore. That's why provocation slides off. That's why chaos feels inefficient. You're not avoiding conflict because you fear it. You're avoiding it because it's rarely optimal. Here's the mindset crystallized into one clean line. Engage only when engagement multiplies outcomes. Anything else is theater. And theater is loud. You don't need loud, you need leverage. So you stack small advantages. Timing, position, optionality. Optionality is power disguised as patience. Because when you have options, you don't rush. When you don't rush, you see. When you see, you choose. And choice is the core of everything they're reacting to. This is why narratives start forming around you. Why speculation replaces certainty. Why people fill gaps with fear or fascination. You let them. Because narratives exhaust the ones who tell them. You're conserving. The cycle tightens again. Tension, release, tension. Each pass cleaner than the last. You're no longer reacting to the room. The room is reacting to the absence of your reaction. That's when influence crosses the line into inevitability. Not because you forced it, because you removed resistance, and in this half-light, with the slow zoom still closing the distance, the realization sharpens, not as a climax, not as a declaration, but as a steady alignment of intent and execution, where strategy replaces impulse, where calm outlasts noise, where silence continues to do the work, where every pause carries weight, every still moment bends the space just enough, and the pressure remains exactly where you want it, suspended, deliberate, unresolved, holding attention without asking for it, shaping outcomes before anyone else realizes a decision has already been made. You choose when to let others think they've won. That choice is terrifying to systems built on forecasting behavior. Here's the mindset shift, the one that changes everything. You are not here to be understood. You are here to be effective. Understanding is optional. Effectiveness is final. So you stopped explaining yourself. You stopped correcting misconceptions. You stopped chasing validation. You let misinterpretation become camouflage. While others argue narratives, you build leverage. While others posture, you position. While others burn energy proving loyalty or strength or morality, you conserve. Energy conserved becomes energy directed. This is the midpoint where the pressure increases, because now the room feels it, not consciously, somatically. People lean back when you lean forward. They speak faster when you slow down. They overplay when you underreact. You've become the variable they can't solve. And here's the second rule: clean and cold. If they can predict your reaction, they can control your outcome. So you break rhythm. You pause where a response is expected. You smile where tension demands anger. You disengage where conflict would feed the system. Pattern interrupt. The camera cuts closer now. No music, just breath. This is the psychological peak approaching, not domination through force, but dominance through composure. You don't need to threaten. Your presence recalibrates the space. Because everyone knows instinctively that you're not operating on impulse, you're operating on timeline, longer than theirs. That's why comparisons get whispered, not because of violence, not because of chaos, but because of control without exhibition, and that scares people trained to spot extremes. You embody the thing they can't model: contained intensity. Here's the principle that locks it in. Power grows when you remove urgency from your own decisions. Urgency is a tell. Calm is concealment. So you breathe slower, you move later, you decide once. And when you do act, it feels sudden only to those who weren't paying attention. But you were. Always. The tension tightens again, because transformation isn't a flip. It's an accumulation. Every time you didn't react, every time you held your line, every time you chose strategy over satisfaction, that's the forge. You're not becoming darker, you're becoming sharper, edges defined, weight distributed, balance corrected. And in that half-light, with the smoke thinning just enough to reveal the outline, the realization settles in, not as a boast, not as a threat, but as a quiet acknowledgement of what you've built through discipline, restraint, and deliberate unpredictability. A presence that doesn't announce itself, a force that doesn't need permission, a mind that understands timing, leverage, and the art of staying unread while the room keeps guessing, recalculating, adjusting, sensing that something has shifted without being able to name it, feeling the pressure without seeing the source, watching the calm remain intact as the slow zoom continues and the silence holds its shape, unbroken, deliberate, charged. Made because decisions, when done correctly, don't announce themselves. They echo later. You understood that early. The difference between motion and momentum. Motion exhausts. Momentum compounds. So you stopped moving just to be seen moving. You learned to wait until the environment tilted in your favor, until probabilities aligned, until resistance weakened itself trying to provoke you. That's the quiet irony. Most obstacles collapse from overextension, not confrontation. You watched it happen again and again. People rush to prove certainty. They rush to secure status. They rush to dominate conversations, timelines, rooms, and in that rush, they expose seams. Seams you notice. A hesitation in the voice when authority is questioned. A joke told too fast to cover insecurity. A sudden change in posture when control slips. You catalog these moments, not emotionally, but structurally. This is where strategy turns surgical. You don't need to outfight anyone. You only need to outlast their inconsistencies, because consistency under pressure is rare, and rarity creates gravity. People start orbiting that gravity without realizing why. They slow down near you. They choose words more carefully. They second-guess impulses they'd normally indulge. Not because you demanded it, because your presence altered the baseline. That's the real shift, from influence to environmental control. You didn't change people. You changed conditions. Here's the next principle, extracted cleanly. Control the conditions, and behavior follows without force. Force creates resistance. Conditions create compliance without awareness. That's why your calm feels heavier than their aggression. That's why your pauses feel louder than their arguments. You're not playing the same game anymore. They're competing for dominance inside a structure you've already stepped outside of. From the outside, patterns become obvious. You see how outrage cycles burn credibility, how constant reaction erodes authority, how emotional leakage shortens timelines. So you sealed the leaks, not by suppressing emotion but by routing it. Anger became focus, frustration became patience, pressure became clarity. This is refinement, not repression. And refinement changes the way you're perceived. People stop trying to read you emotionally. They start trying to predict you strategically. That's when uncertainty spikes, because strategy without visibility creates asymmetry. Asymmetry favors the prepared. You don't need to dominate every exchange. You only need to win the ones that matter. So you choose moments, inflection points, thresholds where small actions produce outsized shifts. You wait for those thresholds with unnerving calm. While others burn energy-filling silence, you let silence fill them. Silence forces projection. Projection reveals intent. Intent reveals weakness. And weakness, when unexploited, becomes complacency. You let complacency grow. That patience is misread as passivity until outcomes settle and positions have already shifted. This is where the tension peaks again. Not explosive, but suffocating. Because people sense they're late. Late to react. Late to adjust. Late to understand. They feel the ground isn't where they left it. That's when fear mutates, not into panic, but into respect. Respect mixed with uncertainty, a dangerous combination. You never asked for it. You never named it. You simply maintained alignment between inner discipline and external timing. That alignment is rare. It's why comparisons start surfacing from observers who look for language strong enough to explain restraint, paired with capability. They reach for extremes because moderation with power confuses them. But you know the truth. You're not extreme. You're exact. Exact with words. Exact with energy. Exact with action. Every move carries intent. Every non-move carries intent. That's the final reframing that locks the transformation in place. Doing nothing, when intentional, is still action. And in this space, where the camera no longer needs to move closer, where the smoke has thinned but the pressure hasn't, where attention remains fixed not because of spectacle but because of control, the silence continues its work. The calm remains unbroken, the strategy remains invisible, and the presence holds steady, unresolved, deliberate, shaping trajectories without signaling, maintaining tension without release, leaving everything exactly where it needs to be for what unfolds next. Unfolds next. Because what comes after mastery of silence isn't action, it's selectivity. You reach the phase where every impulse gets questioned at the gate, not suppressed, interrogated. Does this move expose leverage or protect it? Does this response shorten the timeline or extend it? Does this engagement elevate position or dilute it? Most people never ask those questions. They act first and rationalize later. You inverted that order. And inversion changes outcomes. You noticed how power reacts when it isn't challenged directly, how systems reveal seams when pressure is applied indirectly, how confidence decays when it isn't mirrored back. So you stopped mirroring. You became asymmetrical. That's when things started to feel off to them. Meetings shifted tone, conversations shortened, decisions got delayed around you. Not because you blocked them, but because people sensed weight in your non-commitment. Non-commitment, when intentional, becomes leverage. Here's the next rule, carved quietly beneath the others. Never give clarity to those who haven't earned context. Clarity is currency. You don't spend it on curiosity, masquerading as authority. So you answer less, you reveal later. You let others overinvest emotionally, while you underinvest informationally. That imbalance compounds. They start chasing alignment. You remain anchored. Anchors don't move when waves hit. Waves break instead. This is where psychological pressure becomes ambient, not sharp, not dramatic, constant. People feel it when they're around you, like walking into a room where the air is slightly heavier. Nothing is wrong, nothing is aggressive, yet everything feels measured. You don't rush speech, you don't fill gaps, you don't rescue awkwardness, you let discomfort teach. Discomfort is the fastest instructor, and while others scramble to relieve it, you let it do its work. That's when they reveal priorities. That's when they negotiate against themselves. That's when masks slip, not violently, but subtly. You observe without reacting. Observation without reaction is dominance without fingerprints. This is the stage where transformation locks in. You no longer feel the need to be intense. Intensity comes to you. You no longer seek unpredictability. Your restraint creates it. You're no longer fascinated by chaos. You understand it too well to be impressed. Understanding removes fear. And fearlessness, when quiet, unsettles everything built on intimidation. Here's the mindset crystallized again, sharper this time. You don't intimidate by force. You intimidate by being unmovable. Unmovable values, unmovable pace, unmovable center. People can argue positions. They can't argue gravity. So they adjust, they soften edges, they preface statements, they check reactions that never come. You've become the constant in a system addicted to volatility, and constants dominate over time. Time is your ally now because you stopped measuring progress in moments. You started measuring it in shifts. Shifts in who speaks first, shifts in who defers, shifts in who waits. Waiting used to feel like weakness. Now it feels like command. Command without ceremony. This is where the pressure tightens once more. Not toward release, but toward inevitability. Because inevitability doesn't rush. It arrives quietly, precisely, and in this sustained half-light, where nothing has been declared, nothing has been concluded, where the silence still carries intention and the calm still bends the room, where every pause continues to work and every withheld action reshapes the field. The presence remains exactly as it is meant to be, unreadable, disciplined, strategically dark, holding the line without signaling, letting tension live, letting attention stay locked, letting outcomes drift closer without ever needing to be named. Named. And this is where it resolves, not with noise, not with spectacle, but with recognition. Recognition that what you've built was never accidental. Recognition that discipline shaped the shadow, not impulse. Recognition that control, once internalized, doesn't need to announce itself. You were never chasing fear. Fear followed because it couldn't map you. You were never trying to dominate rooms. Rooms recalibrated because you changed the rules quietly. You understood something most never will. Power that begs to be seen is already leaking. Power that waits stays whole. So here's the final extraction, the rule that seals everything you've heard into one unbreakable frame. The moment you stopped needing reaction, you became the reaction. Not because you threatened, not because you displayed force, but because you mastered timing, restraint, and the art of letting others reveal themselves first. You learned when to step forward. You learned when to step back. You learned that unpredictability, when paired with calm, becomes authority no system can rush. And if anyone ever tries to reduce you to labels, comparisons, or myths, it won't stick. Because labels only work on what's static, and you're adaptive by design. You move when it matters. You wait when it multiplies. You remain centered while others burn themselves out trying to read you. That's not darkness for its own sake. That's strategy refined into presence. So as the light holds low and the silence finally loosens its grip, the understanding settles, not as a warning, not as a boast, but as a steady truth that doesn't need volume to survive. You were never meant to be loud. You were meant to be inevitable.